Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. We will start with the prayer and then we can move from there.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi.
Namaste everybody. Welcome back to our third session on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. I request everybody, if you are not speaking, if you can put yourself in mute, that would be very helpful, because so that we won't get any echo or any disturbance. But if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask. So we are getting into the third session. The first session, we spoke mainly about the 6 traditions or 6 visions of Indian spiritual traditions. And yoga is one of them. We clearly had an understanding where exactly yoga fit into in the overall scheme of things. And last week, we went through a brief overview of the yoga, starting from the Vedic tradition, and we went up to the International Day of Yoga, which happened in 2014. So means it's not a complete history of the yoga, but it was a bird's eye view. So today, what I was proposing to do is to give an introduction of the Yoga Sutra and an introduction of sage Patanjali. But we got a lot of questions in between, and that's why we introduced this session, which is an integrated view of the yoga. So this session is very important. If you learn this session, it will answer a lot of questions we have, a lot of misrepresentations that is going on the name of yoga, etc. So that's why we introduced this session. If you don't get it completely, that is fine. Means we will be talking about this later during the Yoga Sutra. But please feel free to ask any questions in between, because today means if you have a pressing question, which needs to be cleared for the next flow, I would not wait till the end. You can ask any questions in the middle. So that's fine, because if you don't get this session, you will not get a complete understanding of the yoga. So if you have any questions, we can discuss and clarify. So with that introduction, let's move on. So the first point is, when you look at the landscape of yoga, it's a lot. If you ask what is yoga, most of the people say that it will be asanas. But you can hear people say that bhakti yoga. People say that nada yoga. People say that karma yoga or kundalini yoga, raja yoga. So there is a lot of things that are being called as yoga. This is confusing, because when you look at from a superficial perspective, karma yoga appears to be totally different from hatha yoga, and raja yoga appears to be totally different from bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga seems to be again different. So what is that? Why we are calling everything as yoga? And apparently these practices seems to be different. So that creates some confusion. And that's exactly the confusion I got from a lot of people. Again, in YouTube and even from the group, I was asked, there are a lot of things are being called as yoga. Are they connected? Or are they completely separate? And how are they connected? If at all they are connected, how karma yoga is connected with bhakti yoga? How hatha yoga is connected with nada yoga? How jnana yoga is connected with raja yoga? Where exactly these things fit together? And if there is any difference between these practices, what are the differences? What are the common ground? What are the differences? So people wanted to understand how all these things fit together. And that is why I named this session as an integrated understanding of the yoga. Makes sense, right? This is a complete gray area. Any comments? Am I right?
Yes.
It's perfect. I think you just caught the right thread for us to get interested. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So if that's the case, let's try to understand. So now when you go to these yoga studios or yoga teachers training, typically they try to define yoga. Means today, let's try to make it a little bit more interactive so that this subject will be clear. So when you go to a yoga teachers training or a yoga studio, the yoga teacher or the certified, the teacher's trainer, and sometimes in speeches, whenever you ask what is yoga, if you try to define yoga, what is the definition that everybody hear? Anybody want to make a comment?
Yogas chitta vritti nirodha.
That is one message. Yeah. So typically people say, means the standard textbook answer I heard is, people always say that it came from a root called yuj, and yuj means union. And union of what?
The individual soul with God or the super soul?
Yes, that is one answer people say. Some people say that it is body with mind. Some people say that it is body with intellect. There is a lot of gray area. And when you say soul, it means 10 things to 10 people. So we wanted to make very clear that we are moving away from the fuzzy understanding of the yoga to a definite understanding. What is yoga? So the beauty of the Sanskrit literature or the Sanskrit language is any word you can etymologically interpret, because every Sanskrit word comes from a root and that word is typically derived from that root. So let's try to understand what are all the possible meanings of the yoga and how they fits into the total scope of the yoga. Okay, so with that, let's move on. So there are two meanings for the name word yoga. Means mainly, of course, you can have more, but predominantly there are two meanings. And as I said earlier, the word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root yuj. So I don't want to go a lot into Sanskrit, but just an overview. Every word, Sanskrit, it is not like English, right? So English, what happens? A word comes because of so many reasons. Sometimes it is culturally, sometimes it is imported from another language, but unlike any other language, in Sanskrit, every word comes from some 2,500 roots. So using that root, you can always interpret the meaning of that word. For example, Shastra, it comes from the word Shas. Shas means to instruct. Tra means to protect. So that which protects you by giving you proper instruction is known as Shastra. Mantra, right? That which protects you through manana. So like that, every word you can properly derive etymologically. So if you follow that principle, the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj. And this root probably has two meanings per the Paninian grammar. So the first meaning of the word yuj means yojane or melane. Yojane means integrate or unite or yoke. That is the meaning. So you might have studied in set theory in school. There is union and intersection, right? So set A, union set B means what? Means anybody remember? It's A plus B. You're completely merging these two together. Integration, the word is you're connecting. Apparently disconnected entity, you are connecting. Yoke means conventionally you know, right? A bullock cart means a cart is yoked with an animal, so that means it will act as a singular entity. So the word yoga, the first meaning means integrate. So now we will see what exactly we are integrating, but understand that one of the meaning of the word yoga means it is integration, or it is union, or it is yoke. But the most common meaning or the obvious meaning of the word yoga is the next one. And a lot of people miss it. And the second meaning of the word yuj is called Nirodhi or Samadhau. It means mastery. Nirodha means typically the correct meaning is you are avoiding the possibility of something. For example, by constructing a dam, you are avoiding the possibility of wasting the water. And by taking a preventive medicine, right, means the COVID vaccination, you are avoiding the possibility of you getting sick. So Nirodha means an action you do to avoid the possibility of something, or gaining mastery. Like you're learning the mastery of driving. That means you have the control over the car. So Nirodhe, meaning you're learning the mastery over the mind, control over the mind. And the advanced stage, there is a meaning called cessation. You can stop every other thought and focus on one thought. That is also called, means Nirodhe. It can also mean samadhi. Samadhi means don't supervise, means don't give a lot of meaning to samadhi. For the time being, understand that a stable mind, a mind where all your activities are perfectly controlled. A brilliant definition given by Swami Dayananda Saraswati is a well-placed mental state, a state where the emotions are appropriate, the thoughts are appropriate, and complete control of my control. So this is what the second meaning. So the word yoga means integration. So you are trying to integrate something with something. We will see what exactly it is. And also the second meaning of the word yoga is you are trying to gain control over something. And together, this gaining control plus integrating something constitute the total scope of yoga. So it's so brilliant how the etymological meaning, two meanings you can derive from the root, together defines the entire scope. So, but please keep in mind, now onwards, the word yoga can mean two different things. One is integration and the other one is mastery. So please, this is very important. So now let's try to a little bit more deep dive into what exactly is each one of these. So two meanings of yoga. So again, this word yoga, it can be a noun or a verb. So when you use this yoga as a noun, it can means like the first meaning is, let's take the Nirodha. Nirodha means a controlled state. So if you refer a controlled state such as samadhi or nirodha, etc., that is the noun form of the yoga. And if you take the noun form and use the second meaning, it means that integrated state is called yoga. So yoga means where the mind is completely, that is where the chitta vritti nirodha, all this definition comes in. So a state where the mind is completely controlled, completely purified, and completely calm, that state is known as yoga. Yoga also means that a state where your individual is integrated with the true self. Meaning we are going to talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to leave it as fussy, but understand that that integrated state is also known as yoga. So yoga also can be used as a verb. What does that mean? So right now, my mind is not in that controlled state, but I am undertaking a practice. That practice is going to give me that controlled state. I'm undertaking a practice that is going to give me that integrated state of mind. So any sadhana which can lead me to that nirodha state or integrated state, that is also known as yoga. A brilliant example I will give you. When you go to, say, New York Penn Station, there is an Amtrak train lying there. The board of that train is Washington, D.C. You get into Washington, D.C. train. My question is that train Washington, D.C.? You all know that that train is not Washington, D.C. But why do you get into that train? Why that train is called as Washington, D.C.? If you get into that train, you have good faith that that train will take you to the DC. So when you undertake a practice such as bhakti yoga or karma yoga, you have not yet reached that controlled state of mind or hatha yoga. You have not yet reached that controlled state, but you know that by undertaking this practice, I will reach that state. So any sadhana that leads us to the destination of that integrated mental state, or the integrated mental state, is also known as yoga. So again, this was a specific question I got in the internet. That's why I answered. Yoga, it can mean as a verb or a noun. As a noun, it means that end state. And as a verb means it's a sadhana that can lead me to that end state. Any questions or comment?
Yes, Rajaji. Quick question. So is it also correct to understand that yoga or the union, the yuj, cannot happen unless there is chitta, vritti, nirodha?
Absolutely. I'm coming there. So I'm going to sequence it now.
Okay.
But it's a good question. So just hold on that for 10 minutes. I'm coming there.
Okay.
So it will be very clear now. I'm going to explain two meanings, and I will say what is the prerequisites and what is the sequencing. Any other comments? But please keep this in mind. This is such an important point. So let's move on. So now let's try to understand what exactly is the integration or union means. Let me answer superficially, and then I'm going to deep dive into that with the help of some science, with the help of some common sense, and with the help of some understanding. So probably this next 10 minutes, please pay full attention and ask any questions. So integration means, as somebody said in the beginning of the call, that it is the integration or connection between who I think I am, right? Right now I have a understanding about myself to the actual being I am. So it is an integration of my perceived self to the actual self. Come on, this sounds very superficial and abstract. In fact, it is not. So each one of you right now, close your eyes and think for a moment, who am I? So if I think, I feel that I'm Rajesh Rabindranath, right? I'm 5 feet, 8 inch tall. I have some 148 pound weight. My color is this, my hair is this. All these attributes put together is me. So in the current state, each one of us, our identity is, I'm a combination of my body, right? There is a body. This body I take as me. And I have a mind. I take my mind as me. And I have an intellect. I take that me. So it's a compound entity which constitutes of my physical body, mind, and intellect. This is my understanding. And this is what everybody's understanding. So when you refer an entity like Rajesh, it means this. And I had a beginning some times back, and definitely I will have an end after some time. And after that, I cease to exist. And what is the problem? The problem of my body is my problem. The problem of my mind is my problem. And this is my understanding about myself. Here, yoga and Vedanta and all the Indian spiritual tradition, whether including Buddhism, Jainism, everything, comes and tells you that, yeah, it is true that you have a compound identity, but there is a difference. The real you is not the body and the mind and intellect. The real you or the real subject is the consciousness in you. In fact, the body and mind are just tools, just like you use a phone. Because let's say that suppose you want to communicate outside world, sitting at your home, you need an equipment or a gadget or a tool. That tool will help you to communicate or transact with that domain of the world. So like that, the body and mind are not you, but a tool given to you. And when you take this body and mind as you will have a lot of sufferings and problems. So you need to shift your identity from a compound entity constituting of your body, mind, and intellect to the consciousness in you. I know that you will say, come on. Philosophically, it sounds good. But practically, that's not the reality. I am myself. I know. You don't need to tell me my identity. This is what you might be thinking. Let's think through a little bit further. Let me give you some solid examples, which is going to tell you who you are. So let me bring your attention to one worldly scenario. So let's take 3 examples. One is an online meeting. Second is a public speaking engagement. And the third one is a radio broadcast. What I wanted for you to understand or keep in mind is 3 things. So in all these things, right, I am the subject. Let's say that I am doing an online meeting, I am doing a public speaking, and I am doing a broadcast. So the subject is I. Who is that I? We will talk later. But for the time being, I identify the subject as Rajesh. And let's say that my domain or the world I interacting right now is the world of online world, right? Some of you are sitting in India, and I know that some of you are sitting in Europe, and some of you are sitting in different parts of the United States. So for me to interact with you, a tool is mandatory. Let's say that if the Zoom or the YouTube or the WebEx and the computers are not there, your presence is unknown to me, and my presence is unknown to you. So this tool, subject is absolutely a must-have for me to interact with the online world. Even if I exist, but the tool doesn't exist, I'm completely unknown and unmanifest in the world of that virtual world. So second example, public speaking. I'm sitting in a big platform. All of you are sitting in the auditorium. But if there is no microphone or amplifier or audio system, you would see my lips moving and up and down, but I will not be able to interact with you. Again, apart from the subject, a tool or the appropriate tool is mandatory for interacting with a particular domain. So the Zoom or the computer is the tool that I can use to interact with the external world. The microphone is the tool I can interact with the whole auditorium. And if my users are the radio listeners, doesn't matter whether I have the Zoom or anything like that, I need a radio broadcasting system. So what I'm trying to conclude or drive your understanding, your attention is the fact that having a subject and an object is not good enough to complete the transaction. The tool is also mandatory. Now, suppose there is a difference. The subject here is common in all these different transactions. I am there in the Zoom meeting, I am there in the public meeting, and I am also there in the radio station. But for me to interact with the online user community, I need to use Zoom. For me to interact with the radio domain, I need to use the radio technology. And let's say that if the internet is not working, even if I'm there, what is going to happen? You may say, I cannot communicate. So the tool is important, and the functioning of the tool is absolutely must have. I should be taking care of the tool, and that relevance of that tool is pretty much limited to the domain I am using. The relevance of the internet and the Zoom is pretty much relevant to that online. That is not must have tool for the public speaking. So this keep in mind. We are going to apply this example into the subjective domain. So now let me give you another example. This is very interesting example. Let's take an example or an analogy from Vedanta. This is not a conventional yoga example, but this is a pretty much Vedanta example, but I'm pretty sure this example is going to drive home this idea of the consciousness. So you can see me in 2 different situations. Let's say that the first left-hand side, I am in the waking world. I'm in the waking world. And right side, I'm in a dream. So when I'm in New Jersey, I'm sleeping. In that sleep, I had a dream. So the waking world, I can see that I'm interacting with a public forum in Edison Hotel, New Jersey. On the dream, I am sitting in Gangotri. What you're seeing is the beginning of the Ganga. Think about this. Just please pay full attention. We are trying to understand what is consciousness here. So, do I have a body in the waking state? Yes. Do I have a mind? Of course I do. Do I see external world? I do. And am I aware of the fact that I'm interacting with the world? Yes. Come to the dream state. Am I seeing an external world? Oh, I'm seeing Ganga flowing. I'm seeing the Himalayas, brilliant scene. It can take anybody to a different world. That is what I'm seeing. Do I have a body? Yes. Do I have a mind? Do I have some dress? Everything is there. Is the body I experience in that dream state, is that my real body? Can you interact? Just speak. I'm going to give you one example. Let's say that I just fall down there and I got a small cut on my leg in that Gangotri. So in that dream, I was looking for a band-aid. In the dream, I was 100% convinced that there is a wound in my leg. I need to put a band-aid. Suddenly I woke up. What happened? Should I take a band-aid from my New Jersey home and put there?
You cannot.
Why? Because the body I considered as myself in that dream was relevant only in that dream state. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So think about this. What is the subject that was common in the dream and the waking world? Only thing that was common was my awareness. I was in the waking state. I was aware of that external world. I was aware of my thoughts. I was aware of my emotions. And in the external waking world, I was aware of my body. I was aware of an external world. In the dream state also, I was aware of a dream world. I was aware of the Ganga around me. I was aware of the body. And anything I was aware in that dream world is completely absent in the waking world. And everything that was aware on the waking world is completely absent in the dream world. So I can say that all these terminologies, I made it up. So in the waking world, I was aware of my body, my mind, my intellect. In the dream world, I was aware of the dream world, dream body, and the dream mind and dream intellect. 2 minutes back, you agreed me that the dream body is not my real body, because otherwise the cut I got in the dream would have carried forward to the waking state. And please understand that. Look at back the previous example. When you interact with a domain of a world, you need to have a tool. And what we heard when found from the previous example is the subject is common, right? The subject is common, but the tool will vary, and the appropriate tool will help me to interact with the appropriate world. So if you extend that same idea here, I can say that what is common in me, in the dream and the waking world, is my awareness. So the body I have, yes, it is relevant. It is only to that time and space, only for a duration. And what I'm trying to say here is that the awareness is the real subject. And that is what is known as consciousness. So yoga here gives a hypothesis, right? I know that this is only a theoretical understanding. You didn't experience it, and yoga is a practical means for you to experience it. So yoga tells that consciousness or the Purusha is the real subject matter. So you can say that whether you are in dream or waking or deep sleep, the consciousness is common. But the body you experience in the dream is not the body you experience in the waking. And if you extend that example, yoga and Vedanta clearly tells you that this consciousness is going to be common in all the life you have. Let's say that you have life 1, life 2, up to life n. Just extending, like the same consciousness continues to be the same during your waking, dream, and deep sleep. The consciousness in you will be common in all your multiple different lifetime you have. So the real subject or the real common factor in all your interactions, whether it is dream, deep sleep, or waking, or whether it is life 1, life 2, life n, is your consciousness. And that consciousness is the real you. Of course, you can say that I'm Rajesh, but that identity is pretty much limited to this world for this duration. But your real identity will continue. This is a hypothesis. I know that it cannot be proved, but you can logically, it seems it makes sense. So now you may say that, who are you to say that this is logically makes to sense? Let me bring to your attention to some of the greatest intellect of the modern world. 2 areas. We will see from a psychology, neurology perspective and from a modern physics perspective. So before I jump into that, any questions on this topic? Detailed questions we can answer in the Q&A session, but any clarification or anything you need?
Yes,
Rajesh.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jira. So I know that.
Oh, I was just trying to connect the examples you gave about the tool consciousness to what we started with is the Chitta yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is a tool. Where
Yes.
so is my Chitta is consciousness?
No.
I'm trying. No.
No,
Okay.
Chitta is not consciousness. We are going to come into that, right? So where exactly the application of yoga comes in, is that on the tool or is that on the self? The self doesn't need anything. The entire scope of the yoga is going to be only on the tools. So we are going to come step by step into that.
So
Rajesh,
I can go. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just have a follow-up question. So
Sure,
you will
please.
be connecting what Arnab asked. Are you going
Absolutely.
to connect your example to that?
Absolutely. I'm going to.
Okay. I will wait.
Yeah. Now this is step-by-step unfoldment. So we are going to connect that. Because this understanding is very important for you to understand the scope of yoga. Rathika, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry. I think probably this will answer mine too. So I was thinking when you were talking about the subject and object as an example, you were talking about 2 different entities, but here the struggle is we are the subject and we are the object kind of thing, right?
Correct.
So that kind of that is what is like, yeah. When you go to the dream state, when you wake up, we can relate, but now we are going to connect to the other way around, like from that wakeful state to the actual consciousness. So
Correct.
the subject object is going to be like kind of hard to grasp, right? So
it is. The reason means I'll give you a simple anecdote or a simple example, and then this is what we are going to analyze in the whole Yoga Sutra, how to make that subject object difference, right? But let me ask you a simple question for your conviction. When you were in the dream, when I was in Gangotri, have I ever imagined that is a dream?
No.
If somebody in the dream came to you and said that your real identity is a Rajesh sleeping in a bed, you would have told that as a superstition.
Right.
That's exactly what is happening. So when you expand your awareness, you can see more clearly. But let me make one more point and we will jump in because we have to finish everything. There is a special kind of dream. That dream is known as lucid dream. Have anybody experienced that? Lucid dream is a dream. Why? It means you are in the dream, but you know that you are dreaming. That is called a lucid dream. So let's say that you are in a dream and you know that it is dream. Then this makes sense. So the real practice of yoga or Vedanta is what is going to give you, because you cannot run away from the life. You have to pay your bill. You have to take care of your means teenager who is making trouble, right? You have to take care of your boss. You have to take care of your mortgage, everything. You cannot run away. But only thing is that while you are living in the dream problems are your problem. You cannot say that they are not real. So the worldly problems are problem which needs to be handled. But you get a bigger picture. And this is what yoga is going to teach you in a step by step. How to avoid these anxieties? Because the very definition of anxiety is you cannot cope up with the expected outcome. So how do you do that? So this is what we are going to see, but let's wait in a step-by-step manner. I know I'm happy to see the enthusiasm, but this is very good. So we'll continue. So I wanted to give a little bit more color to or credibility to what I'm saying by quoting some of the greatest mind in the modern world. So let me bring the first couple of leading physicists. The first physicist I want to quote is Max Planck. Max Planck is a famous German physicist who created a revolution by creating a definition equal to energy equal to h nu. He is considered as one of the most pioneers of the modern physics. So he found, because he was trying to understand what is the fundamental building block that creates the universe. And his finding was, I quote put there, he said, consciousness is fundamental. He said, even the matter is a derivative of consciousness. It's such a brilliant scientific mind. So you may not believe what I said, but I'm saying that the leading physicists had the same view. The leading physicist whom we look upon for giving us the model of the universe. One is Max Planck. The second person I want to quote is Sir Erwin Schrödinger. Anybody know who is Erwin Schrödinger?
Schrödinger equation?
Exactly. He is the one who created the Schrödinger equation. He is considered as the father of quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics is the model that is created to explain how the micro world functions. Because there are two theories. One is the theory of relativity by Einstein and the quantum mechanics by Erwin Schrödinger. He wrote a book called What is Life? A physicist aspect of the living cell. That is the content of this book. And this book, he tells, consciousness cannot be accounted in physical terms. And it is absolutely fundamental. That is the real subject. And Schrödinger, I don't know anybody read this book, but you can read this book. He quotes Vedanta directly. He was an ardent fan of Advaita Vedanta. Anybody heard this? You should understand this. This is so popular. He read these Upanishads translation through a translation of a translation. But that itself was so much fascinating for him. So this is one view. This is from leading physicists. I can go on and on. In the modern world also, there is a lot of findings comes in. But where we were completely struggling with the consciousness studies is the neurology. So before last 20 years, the neurology's attention went into the consciousness. So when I came to this country in 2000, I was looking for the consciousness studies and there was nothing much. But thank God, the last 20 years made a lot of differences. One of the credit we need to give is a philosopher scientist called David Chavez. You can Google his TED talk. He coined a term called the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness. So the consciousness studies, they divided their entire attention into two particular blocks. One is a simple problem of consciousness, and the other one is called hard problem of consciousness. Please give me full attention, right? The simple problem of consciousness means the brain imaging technique has improved and it took us to a new dimension. So you can clearly tell us that which part of the brain reacts to when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're upset, when you're jealous, all that is identified. But one thing that the science has made zero progress till now is how do we give the subjective experience? Because if you really look at you, you know that I know myself. No robot in the world have that subjective experience. Whereas no reductionism, for example, when you burn a candle, you know that, okay, the candle was, the flame is because of the result of this chemical reaction. Like that, the scientists cannot figure it out yet. What exactly is creating this consciousness? And this gentleman called this David Chalmers, he is of the opinion, I'm going to forward a TED talk, 15 minutes of TED talk he has done very recently. He clearly states that the consciousness is outside of the brain. It is not a byproduct of the brain. It is something beyond brain, and it is something fundamental. Again, this is not Patanjali talking. This is not Krishna talking. This is not a sage in India talking. This is somebody who is leading the department in Columbia is talking. I had a lot of conversation about this particular subject with the respected Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. He shared a stage with this David Chalmers very recently. And there are more and more neurologists starts believing this. Of course, this is not yet proven. Maybe another 100 years, it will lead into that direction. But the very same fact that the science is also leading into this direction in the last 10, 15 years is a great sign. And then the psychology also developed a new model. It is called panpsychism. So panpsychism is a new branch of psychology in the science. It means that consciousness is not just limited to the body. It is not a byproduct of the body. Up until now, the belief, even now, a lot of scientists believe that it is not completely proven, but there is a considerable amount of scientists believes that the consciousness is fundamental. And that's exactly what the yoga's postulate is. I don't need to endorse the yogic teaching or the Vedantic teaching by quoting the scientist, but this is for our mind to conceive that this is not somebody is talking about superstitions. This is something big. At least the greatest minds of the modern world are also researching in the same direction. Anybody wants to add anything or comment? Vijay, any comments on this? Because I know that this is a topic which is very much interested to you.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Thanks to the discovery and the advances on the quantum mechanics. Otherwise, actually, Hindu philosophy, the Advaita Vedanta would not have got so popular in the recent past. De Broglie, Max Planck, and Einstein, even as recently as David Bohm, for example, right? So they really looked into this. So this is, if I can just add just further comment a little bit. So before Copernicus or Galileo, there was when only two-dimensional geometry was there, up is up and below is bottom, right? It is clearly labeled. No one had any confusion. But when the third coordinate was added, this up and below, this distinction got vanished. There is no up and in the three-dimensional space. Nowhere is labeled what is up, what is bottom. Everything is up there, right? Now the first forward Einstein came along. Then the three spatial coordinates not enough. We need to add the time coordinate also. When the time was added to the three spatial coordinates, the past, present, and future all also got vanished. They were all there basically. It all depended on the realization of the individual, the awareness of the individual, basically that is. And then the physicists realized that, oh my goodness, can be realized depending on the individual awareness. They can go into the past, future, present. It doesn't matter that is. So ancient rishis actually they realized that actually whatever the ancient rishis realized, the quantum physics is actually exposing that basically right now.
Right.
So
and this study of consciousness, it is gaining a lot of momentum. And you can see a lot of international seminars on that. And I will post a TED Talk video immediately after this course, like men's class. You can understand. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate, but we can reserve most of the questions at the end because we have to cover a few slides. But is there any blocking questions? We can address that, and the rest we can take at noon.
I would like to add two things.
Yeah.
And one is that somebody said once that it make a lot of sense to me, that saying that the brain produces consciousness is like thinking that the television set is producing the people who are talking inside the television. And I think it's very telling that it is not the case, you know, it's not that. And also, you know, I think a lot of research, I think this is the time when there is going to be a lot of research in that area. You know, it's not, it's something that we still do not understand, and we need a new science that can explain that.
Yeah.
None of the current sciences have enough power to delve into these issues, you know.
Exactly. So I was reading like one physics' evolution, right? So when the classical physics came, later point of time, that was not good enough. The fundamental building blocks developed by the classical physics was not good enough to explain a lot of things, and the science is stuck with the consciousness studies like that.
Yeah, I know. The other thing that I want to mention is that in the Western philosophy and Western science includes, you know, time as one dimension, another dimension of the space. And in Eastern philosophy, that is not true. You know, time is not a dimension of space. It's treated as a different phenomenon. It looks like that's the right thing to think.
Absolutely. We will be delving deep into that, but I don't want to complicate everybody because we don't want to, this is not a physics or a neurology session, but I just quoted this to say that similar thinking is happening in the other areas also.
Yeah.
With that, we can move. So what is yoga ultimately? So you wanted to shift your identity, because right now we believe that we are a combination of body, mind, and intellect. From that view, I wanted to shift my identity to the consciousness. So instead of saying that I am the body, I will say that I have the body. Instead of saying that I am angry, it will say that I have anger in me. So you differentiate between the subject and the tool. And this is an extremely important practice of yoga. So integration, of the meaning of union or integration means you are trying to re-establish, because you don't have to create this identity. You don't have to develop anything new. It is a cognitive phenomena. You just need to understand who you are. So means I know that it might be vague right now. This is what the theme of the entire Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra is going to unfold this on a step-by-step basis. So in the interest of time, let me go to the next topic, next meaning. So if the definition of yoga is the union with your actual self or self-realization, do you know how many yogis will be in the world? There will be a Vivekananda or a Ramana Maharshi or a Jesus Christ or like every tradition has created masters, but very few. So most of us cannot be yogis. That is where the second meaning of the yoga comes in. It is the mastery of the mind. So any practices that is leading you at controlling your mind. So meditation, the hatha yoga, the pranayama, all those practices will fit into this bucket. Any practices that purifies your mind, karma yoga, kriya yoga in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, all that is part of that. Any practices that relaxes your mind and keep the mind in a stable state, that is also yoga. So when you think about the entire scope of the yoga, any practices to gain the mastery of the mind, purify the mind, controlling the mind, that is yoga. Any practices that takes you to your own true identity, that's also yoga. So now let me come to the Arnab's question. This is the integrated view of the yoga. So you can, on a high level, you can say that there are two stages. The first stage is gaining a pure, calm, controlled mind. And that state is known as the beginning stages of the samadhi. And also it can be called as the Nirodha state. How you can purify and gain control or mastery of the mind. It can be done through the karma, or meaning the actions. It can be done through devotion. It can be done through upasana. It can be done through upasana means the dhyana or all those meditation. It means that is another means. And it can be done through asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha. So this is where all the so-called yoga practices fit into. The karma yoga is, what is the purpose of karma yoga? The karma yoga is to purify your mind. What is the purpose of the bhakti yoga? It is to purify your mind. It is upasana yoga. What is the purpose of upasana yoga? Again, to purify and calm your mind. So chitta vritti and chitta sthiti, or samadhi or nirodha, is the goal of that initial yoga practices. And once you gain this pure, calm, controlled state, that is where you can practice this integration. And that is through knowledge, and that is through some practices, and that leads to a state called kaivalya or moksha. That is the self-realization. So you can see here, right? So the first stage is, just as yoga practitioners, we will be engaged in any of these, one of these practices. It will be, when you do this hatha yoga, pranayama, yes, I'm practicing yoga. Whether I know it or not, I am practicing to stabilize my body, because yogic masters has clearly identified that the mental stability cannot be achieved without the physical stability. So Krishna brilliantly defines this in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. You have to follow a lifestyle. And what is that lifestyle? He tells, yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta sopnavabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. The yoga will remove the obstacles or sorrows when you follow a lifestyle. What is that lifestyle? Yukta hara vihara. Appropriate food, not too much, not too less, in appropriate quality and quantity. And appropriate amount of workouts, activity. Appropriate amount of recreation, not too much, not too less. Appropriate amount of sleep, not too much, not sleep, too less. This is going to prepare for you for the higher practices. And in the 6th chapter, Krishna brilliantly explains the upasana yoga, the meditation, the dhyana yoga, the power of this dhyana yoga. Because when you meditate, you are gaining control of your mental activity. Just like you build your physical muscles of the body, the meditation will bring the mental muscles required for the higher practices. So you cannot achieve this kaivalya or the self-realization, forget it, first before achieving this chitta vritti nirodha. That's why the two meaning of the yoga makes perfect sense. Most of the people, yoga teachers and teachers training courses I see, they talk about the union, but forget about the union. As beginning practitioners, let's talk about the nirodha. Let's gain the body control, the mind control. And then from there, you can move further. So this is the integrated view of the yoga. So now you know, right, where the karma yoga fits, where the upasana yoga fits, where the bhakti yoga fits, where the hatha yoga fits. Any questions? Arnab, this is what you are asking, right? The sequencing.
Absolutely, Rajaji. My question is that in order to attain the first step, Nirodha, do we need to follow all of karma, bhakti, upasana, or any one is enough? Excellent question.
Excellent question. So theoretically, one is good, right? So if you follow karma yoga plus dhyana yoga, that is good enough. But the great master Swami Vivekananda, his original contribution was, he said, a mixture of this will be really good. And now that's where I'm going to do. See, Patanjali, what he did was, he didn't want to complicate us through all these details. He created a package which collects this bhakti, karma, upasana, everything together, meditation, everything together, and presented as the Ashtanga Yoga. So if you follow this Ashtanga Yoga, that is good enough. So the Yama Niyama, if you really think about it, Yama Niyama is for the purification of the mind. Asana is mainly for gaining the concentration and the body. Again, the goal of Yama Niyama Asana is not Kaivalya. It is for the Nirodha. And pranayama, again, it is for your mind control. Pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana, again for the mind control. And when it comes, means when you practice this much, right? Dhyana means you're meditating an external object and you're able to pull your mind back when your concentration moves there. And when that dhyana becomes samadhi in the Patanjali scheme of yoga, what happens? You are getting meditative absorption. So the beginning stages of the samadhi is the Nirodha. And from there, Patanjali builds on a step-by-step different states of samadhi he leads us to. Savikalpa, Sananda, Sananda, Sasmita. And then finally it leads to the Asamprajna, the samadhi, and from there Kaivalya. So Arnabji, to answer your question, yes, you can practice all of this thing in parallel, but easy solution, a packaged solution. This is the beauty of what Patanjali did in the whole scheme of yoga. He looked at the entire spectrum. He understood what lifestyle one need to follow and developed this Ashtanga yoga. And this Ashtanga yoga touches every aspect of the definition of the yoga, and it takes you from your current state to your future state or the desired future state, which is the Kaivalya or the Moksha state. So now you know where exactly the Patanjali yoga fits in. And on top of this, I didn't add to the slide, but for your awareness, I'm going to say that when you look at the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it talks about the two types of yoga. One is Ashtanga yoga, which we described here. And the other one is called Kriya yoga. So Kriya yoga is pretty much similar to the Karma yoga you see in the Bhagavad Gita. So Kriya yoga talks about three things. Tapas, consistent effort. You need to make sure that I do this one day. I meditate 30 minutes one day and the next 1 year I don't do it. That won't work. You need to put, tapas means there is heat. You're working hard towards that. Then swadhyaya. You cannot just blindly follow that. You have to study your scriptures very regularly. And then he introduces something called Ishvara Pranidhana. You're surrendering to the God because you have to have some grace. So this is the Ashtanga yoga. And the Ashtanga yoga takes you from the beginning to the end. It is a packaged deal. It is such a beautiful way of life. So when you look at this Ashtanga yoga, you can say that this Ashtanga yoga is a way of life consisting of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And what if you just say that it's a way of life, that is not good enough. The way of life should be directed towards a view. And what is that view? Kaivalya at the end, and in the interim, Samadhi or the Nirodha. So Dr. Radhakrishnan, the second president of India, he defined this Sanatana Dharma, the so-called Hindu faith, means as a way of life with a view. And what is that view? Kaivalya. Yoga being one of the Vedic tradition, it follows that idea. So it's a way of life towards a view, which is Kaivalya. And the beauty is that, I may not get the Kaivalya in this lifetime, but I can still progress from where I am towards some higher state. Even a little bit of practice, it is going to give me that much result. Those who studied Bhagavad Gita, Krishna marked this very heavily in the second chapter. He tells, Neha Pikramana Shostri Pratyavayo Navidyade Solpam Apyasya Dharmasya Prayate Mahadobhaya. Even a little bit of practice will give you that much benefit. So please, this is the deal, and this is the package. Hopefully this was clear, because I got so many questions where exactly things fits together and what is the integrated view. And that is why I added this session. And hopefully this makes sense. It may not be completely clear, but at least you got an overview, right?
Rajeshji, so will it be fair to assume like the two stages you said, the two parts, the two definitions like Nirodha and union. So basically achieving Nirodha is all we need to do, because ultimately once you are there, automatically the union happens. Like,
yes,
right?
Right. Means the second stage is very simple if you achieve the first stage.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So what happens is a lot of spiritual practitioners with their enthusiasm focuses on the second stage. They fail. Reason is, without you controlling your mind and the body, you cannot achieve that higher. So forget about that Krishna. So if you really think about the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, out of the 4 padas, only 1 chapter is dedicated to the last step. So that let me give you that. The Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the first 3 chapters falls into the first bucket. The last chapter falls into the last bucket. Out of 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, maybe 70 verses talks about Kaivalya or moksha. The 90% of the Bhagavad Gita is dedicated to stage 1. But people, the so-called spiritual people, they wanted to get moksha or Kaivalya. Forget it. Let's focus on the first goal, samadhi. I'm being practical there.
There is a little known text. It's called the Bija Yoga that puts this in perspective about people who want to get to the second stage without going through the first. And it says that along the history has been a lot of people who have miserably failed to do this, that you need to do basically the first part, otherwise it's pure illusion to pretend to get into the second part, and you can fool yourself all the time.
Exactly. Only exceptions are, right? Sometimes what happens is those who believe in karma, like suppose in one life you completed stage 1, and if you come back to this life 2, for example, people say Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he was directly getting into the Kaivalya, or a Mirabai who getting directly into Kaivalya. That means they are right to souls. They came with that type of a pure, calm, controlled mental state. But 99% of the case, you have to go through stage 1.
Yeah.
And in Bhagavad Gita, to clarify this point, Arjuna asked Krishna, you say that Kaivalya or moksha is the higher goal, but you are asking me to do karma. How is it possible? Krishna said, you have to go to elementary school before you go to PhD. That's exactly what he tells.
Yeah.
So this is very important, and Patanjali clarifies that, Krishna clarifies that. I got one more question, and I will discuss that in the next slide, and we will go to the Q&A. So the next question I got was, people were reading Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda, when he presented this yoga in United States, he presented 4 streams of yoga: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Raja Yoga. His lectures are very popular, and very interestingly, as I said, like the Vedanta Society of New York published this book before India. So in that book, he tells the Karma Yoga is good enough to full moksha. Is that contradictory to this model? That was the question. No, actually, that's what I wanted to just say, that what Vivekananda said in his definition of Karma Yoga, there is 2 parts. The first part is purifying the mind. And then the second part, he talks about the karma sannyasa, which is Jnana Yoga. And his Raja Yoga, Yama to Dhyana, was the Raja Yoga, and Samadhi he put in the second bucket. His Bhakti Yoga, he called it as Apara Bhakti and Para Bhakti. So the first stage is your devotion is for external things, but Para Bhakti means you are seeing yourself as God. So that is the third thing. And Jnana Yoga, the beginning stage, he said that dedicated study of the scriptures. And finally, the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. This is not important, but I just wanted to say that when you see the Swami Vivekananda's 4 stream of yoga, is that contradicting from the original picture? No, it is perfectly aligned. And he's a master who pretty much very much aligned with that thought. So there is no contradiction here. So understand that. So finally, so let's go back. This is the summary we saw. This is the integrated view of the yoga. So the yoga word has 2 meanings. The first meaning is called Nirodha, meaning any practices that leads to a pure, calm, controlled mind is known as yoga. And 95% of the yoga practices comes here. And the second definition is the union, which is called connecting yourself with the higher consciousness. And per the model of yoga, you are consciousness, which is independent of your body and which is more fundamental than the physical matter. And I quoted examples from the modern scientific thing about a similar line of thinking. But This is what the different, the big picture. And we are going to see this big picture from a Raja Yoga perspective in the upcoming sessions. So when we study the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, you will see where exactly each one of this fits together. So with that, we are getting into the last portion. Those who wants to drop,